Hi, this is Dr. Stephanie Wautier, and I'm the host of Conversations with a Chiropractor. I believe healing often begins with connection, and that's really what this podcast is about. These are real conversations about health, healing, life, and the stories that shape us. Some guests come from the wellness world, some come from the community, and some simply bring a life experience worth sharing. My hope is that each conversation invites you to listen, learn, reflect, and maybe see your own life or healing in a new way. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy this conversation with a chiropractor. Today on Conversations with a Chiropractor, we are joined by Laura Hoorweg. She is a spiritual counselor, intuitive coach, and psychic medium with over 10 years of experience helping people move through grief, trauma, burnout, life transitions, and the deeper patterns that keep them feeling stuck or disconnected from themselves. Her work was born from her own path of healing, awakening, and learning to trust the wisdom that life's hardest chapters can reveal. She knows what it means to rebuild her life from the inside out. Not by pretending the struggle didn't happen, but by allowing it to become a part of her medicine. So we are so excited to talk to Laura today from Canada. Thanks for being on this show.
Thank you for having me.
So I always love to hear people's stories. And I mean, it sort of seems like you were called into the spiritual work really from the time you were young. But you had some life-changing experiences happening as an adult that really, let's just say, like broke you open or made you really tackle this subject of being spiritually awake.
Yes, actually, it all started around 52, which is an interesting time because 52 is 7, and 7 is the vibration of spiritual mastery. So I always find that interesting that it happened at that specific time. But it was a huge change. I had just left my 30-year career in advertising and newspaper business, and I was just sort of taking some time off and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And there was a whole raft of things that happened in a row. Number one, I didn't realize when I gave up my corporate job that there was so much ageism in the world. And I was told actually by one of the headhunters who really liked me that she had told me that her clients, which are of course the employers, had told her not to send anybody over the age of 45, which was a real eye opener. So
Wow.
I was like, wow, I thought I had no trouble getting another position because I was, I had so much experience and I did really well at my job and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, that was kind of a big shocker. So then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then shortly after being hit with this blow, my partner suddenly died. And that just threw everything into the works. Because if you've ever had anyone very close to you, a parent, a partner, even, unfortunately, sometimes even a child, when you lose somebody, it's not just about the grief process, because what ends up happening, fortunately and unfortunately, it becomes a major healing journey, because what happens is anything that you have swept under the rug, anything that you have failed to examine in your own life, even some things that you thought you dealt with, which is an interesting surprise. Those things all suddenly come up, and you're kind of, not only are you in grief, but you also are having to deal with all these different issues from your life. So it was a very challenging time, and I ended up going into about a year, maybe about a year and a half, very intensive healing journey, where I did some pretty unorthodox things, pretty alternative things.
Tell us about those things that you did during your healing journey.
Well, first, I ended up being guided to go to this location in Brazil and work with a man who's best known as John of God in Brazil. And he's a trance channel, and he channeled all kinds of angelic and ancient healers and things like that. So I had originally only signed up for a 2-week visit with a group, and I ended up staying there for another 4 weeks on my own. So I was in Brazil for about 6 weeks. And it's really interesting. It was very intense, but it got me part of the way. And while I was there, I was led to something else. And so I found out about plant medicine and ayahuasca. So I had just gone home, and then very shortly after that, I was off again on another healing journey to Peru, where I actually did an intensive ayahuasca retreat for 3 weeks in the jungle, in the Amazon jungle. So that was pretty wild too.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. And this is not a recreational thing. This is healing medicine, and it's an extremely, extremely intense experience. And like I said, it's not for everyone. But it really helped me. And then I came home, and then again, I was off. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, because I knew I wasn't going to, the whole marketing advertising thing wasn't panning out. So I had gotten seriously in, actually just before my partner passed away, into yoga. So I decided that my new gig would be, I would be a yoga teacher. So I realized that if I was actually going to teach yoga, I needed to get certified as quickly as possible. So I ended up finding a really well-known yoga school in Costa Rica, run by a couple of Americans. So I ended up going and doing a month-long intensive in Costa Rica, getting certified for yoga. And it was wonderful, and it was part of my healing journey, which I discovered later. I realized when I got home that I was never meant to actually be a teacher, a yoga teacher. It was really part of my own healing journey. So that's another part of it.
I think it's really intriguing how you've been so open to like the next thing, right? Like, what would you tell our listeners when you say, I felt led? Like, what kinds of things, like still small voices or nuances or opportunities, or what would you say when you're making these decisions, trying to navigate, like, what is the next best thing? What would you tell our listeners about that?
Well, when you're in that kind of state, it's really good or anytime actually, now that I think about it, anytime, is you want to follow the synchronicities, because every one of these things I was led through synchronicities, and you just sort of do the discernment, double check in your heart. And if it feels right, just go with it. Because also sometimes you need to experiment, because different things work differently for other people. But when I say I was led, I was following synchronicities. I was also following my heart and what I seemed to be led to. And it all just kind of clicked together. And really, after I came back from Costa Rica, I found out about a yoga retreat in Hawaii. And it was interesting because this was now about approximately a year after my partner had died, and he had lived in Hawaii he was an American, and he had lived in Hawaii for 20 years before I met him, and he loved Hawaii. So I felt the urge to take him home. So I ended up taking his ashes to Hawaii, to spread his ashes in Hawaii. You're not actually supposed to do that, but I did it anyway. That's a whole nother
We
thing.
won't tell.
We won't tell. Well, they couldn't do much about it now anyway. You got to get caught in the act. But it just happened. This is, again, another synchronicity. It just happened that there was a major Wanderlust yoga event going on the North Shore, where Tim had lived for most of the time that he was in Hawaii. And where I had already planned to spread his ashes. Okay. So I ended up going to this yoga conference and spreading his ashes at the same time. So this is what I'm talking, interlocking synchronicities. So that was also I would say also part of my healing journey, because that was my final goodbye.
You know, grief is so like multi-layered and I think unexpected. And this is one of the things that, you know, you've left your 30-year corporate job, and then you have like the grief over the ageism, and then your partner suddenly passes away. So grief has really become a part of what you are able to help people with. Is that correct? This episode of Conversations with a Chiropractor is supported by Lemon Grove Oil. One of the things I'm always paying attention to, both in this podcast and in my work, is where something comes from. Not just what a product says it does, but who created it, why they created it, and whether there is real care behind it. That is one of the reasons lemon grove oil feels like such a natural fit here. Lemon Grove was founded by chiropractor Dr. Jerry Del Canton. This is not a random wellness brand that appeared overnight because CBD became popular. It grew out of the chiropractic world, where trust matters, where quality matters, and where people are often looking for thoughtful ways to support themselves between visits, during their busy seasons of life, and in the day-to-day routines that shape how they feel. Lemon Grove offers professional-grade CBD products, including topical lotions, butters, roll-ons, and gummies. They focus on quality, transparency, THC-free formulations with third-party testing, and products designed with healthcare providers in mind. I think that matters because when you are choosing something for yourself or your family, you want more than nice packaging. You want to know there is a real philosophy behind it. If you're curious about Lemon Grove oil, visit their website at www.lemongroveoil.com. Visit the link in the description and use code DRStephanie at checkout to save 10% on your next order. This offer is exclusive to listeners of Conversations with a Chiropractor.
That's true. Yes. A lot of the grief work I do is I'm a psychic medium, and those two things are different. And a lot of people think they're the same thing. Psychics read energy and can go back into energy and past lives and all those kinds of things. Mediumship is something different. It's a totally different gift, and it's really about receiving messages from loved ones on the other side. And there are people out there now, which is a bit of a frustration to me, who will tell you that they can make you a medium. Okay. No one, mediumship is a very special, and let's put it this way. Everyone is psychic to some degree. Okay. It's just like everybody can play basketball. It's just like not everybody's really good at it. Okay. So everybody is psychic, but only some people. Mediumship is a totally different gift. So I always say it this way. It's easier to look at it this way. All mediums are psychic. Not all psychics are mediums.
Interesting.
And there are some people who would probably disagree with me. Most of the people who are out there touting that they can basically teach anybody to be a medium. But some of the most famous mediums that there have ever been are on my side. So.
Well, yeah, educate our listeners about this because this is probably something that many folks don't know about. So, yeah,
Well,
definitely.
if you have the gift, if you're born with the gift of mediumship and you can, and trust me, you pretty well find out about it fairly early because you start receiving messages from people. If you have the gift already, somebody can definitely help you hone that gift and make it better and stronger. Okay, that's been going on forever, centuries and centuries. But if you don't have the gift, somebody can't make you a medium. And that's why there's a lot of confusion between psychic and medium. Basically, psychic is all the clairs, and it's really about reading energy, whether that energy be current lifetime or past lifetime. This is where a lot of people get into the Akashic records and all that stuff because it's just energy work. It's reading the energy of those files, shall we say. So it's quite different. But my helping people with grief is mainly about delivering messages from the other side, from loved ones, because so many people have regrets, they have guilt, and it's not just the grief, but people don't one of the biggest regrets and things that keeps people locked in grief is a lot of people get wrapped up in the fact that they weren't there when somebody passed. And actually, people don't want you to be there when they pass. Okay. There's a thing that happens. The easiest example is when somebody's in the hospital, like the whole family will be gathered around this person for sometimes days, sometimes even weeks when somebody's in the process of passing in the hospital. And the first time that everybody just decides, okay, we're all going to go down and have something to eat. Okay, that's usually when the person passes, because really there's that they want us to remember them the way they were and not the way they were in during their passing. Okay, so that happens all the time, and it's just like, it's they wait till everybody's gone. Other things, you know, it's different. Go ahead.
I have heard that, and as an ex-critical care nurse, I've been with people as they,
Okay.
do take their last breath. And what do you think about in those, like during those last moments when we here on Earth are encouraged to sort of give that person permission to go? Like, what do you feel that person who's passing? I mean, what struggle is that with them holding on versus them letting go?
It's very different from person to person. Some people are able to let go very easily. Some people pass in their sleep, which I think is wonderful. Some people, I think a lot of people who sort of claw and hang on to death are people, hang on to life, are people who feel that they've convinced themselves that they're not finished, or that things have been left unsaid. Or there are people that are simply frightened of passing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, through my work and through my knowledge, I'm not, I don't have one iota of fear of death. My greater fear would be to remain living and somehow disabled to the point where I would have to be constantly cared for. That to me would be the nightmare. Actually passing away has no fear attached to it at all for me, because I know what the other side is like, and I know that the transition is, if you allow it to be, it's very, very easy.
What would you say? So I know that you searched for God when you were younger, a little girl who didn't go to church. Your family didn't go to church, but you decided you were going to put on your Sunday best and find God in churches. And you more found God in nature, as you kind of spoke about earlier, but not on the podcast, but in a different setting. What would you tell our listeners, religious, non-religious, spiritual, non-spiritual? What would you tell them about, quote unquote, the other side? Like heaven, if you were,
Well, I
or
use the
whatever.
word heaven because everybody kind of knows I often use the word home. Okay.
Mm.
Because I look at heaven or the other side as home, because that's where we come from and that's where we return back to. So it's some place that is very known to us, and it's really our home. It's really our true home. We're actually more like visitors here. Okay. So, it's a and when we go back home, when we shed our bodies and we go back in spirit to the other side, we also shed most of all the human things. Like a lot of people, this is another thing that people have problems with, people grieving and people who have left loved ones who go the other side. If they had an acrimonious relationship with this person, it creates a whole nother layer of grieving and guilt and resentment and all those things. And I always tell people right up front that all that falls away. Because when you contact somebody a loved one on the other side, even if you in this life, in this physical life, absolutely couldn't stand each other and you had all kinds of personal issues, once they passed over, those things go away. Okay. They're just dropped. They're dropped like the body. And when somebody's on the other side, this is another thing about being on the other side. You see everything from a higher level, from a higher spiritual level, and all this human pettiness stuff that we all experience. There's none of that. Okay. There's none of that. But the advantage of being here is the way that this is why I like calling it Schoolhouse Earth, because we're really here to evolve our souls, and we're here on earth. And I'm literally telling you that there's a lineup to get in. There's a lineup of souls to get into planet Earth, Schoolhouse Earth. And the reason being is it's so challenging to live here. And that it's true. In case you haven't noticed, okay, we grow the most through challenge. Okay. When everything's going hunky dory and you're really happy and life's easy, It's wonderful and can be very joyful, but usually in those periods of our life, we're really not expanding. We're really not learning very much. It's really through the trials and tribulations of our lives that we're actually learning a lot, that we're actually progressing our soul. So we actually grow on the other side, but it's very, very slow because there's not a lot of challenge on the other side, okay? Definitely not the way there is here. So this is why everybody is so anxious to get into Earth. And and I've been shown and told over and over again that that is the uniqueness of Earth. That is why so many souls, so many energetic beings, I don't know if you want to call them extra, I kind of stutter on that one. Other dimensional beings, they are so interested in this planet, in this schoolhouse Earth, because we are extremely unique in that sense. Because we have our own dominion, we have free will, we have all these challenges, and we're able to evolve very, very quickly if we allow ourselves, okay? There are some people, okay, and some lifetimes where we simply don't allow ourselves to learn those lessons. And guess what? If you don't learn those lessons that you planned for that particular lifetime, you're going to be coming back and learning those lessons again.
So what would you say to our listeners? What did you learn through the process of losing your partner when you were doing that really deep spiritual work in Brazil and Peru and then Costa Rica? Was there one thing? Were there many, many, many things? Was it something that you can't even describe because it was so detailed in your processes?
Well, it was all those things. It was many, 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 many things. I had a really super challenging, like many people. I always thought that for a long time when I was young that I was alone, but I found out since that a lot of people have very, very challenging childhoods and early adulthoods, which I did have. And so I had a lot of issues and things from that needed to be cleared. Some of which I had already worked on to some extent, some other. Okay. So that was part of it. Dealing with the grief from my losing my partner. That was another issue, but that was mainly about because of my spiritual beliefs and stuff like that. I didn't have as hard a time letting go as some people who don't have those beliefs would, because I was absolutely knowing that he was in a better place than that things, I missed him personally from being here,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't quite the same as for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The other thing is I went through, well, I'll give you an example. When I was on one of my ayahuasca journeys, ayahuasca is a jungle goddess spirit. She can show up in many forms. The maiden, the crone, and she also shows up as a very large, giant snake, like a massive boa constrictor. And this is actually how she showed herself to me. And initially it was like, whoa, because she was like right in my face. And she took me on what I can only call very much a standard, a shamanic journey. And if you're at all familiar with that, it's also the shamanic journey is also represented in Egyptian lore. It's basically you die to yourself and you go through the underworld and you come back up and you're reborn anew. And she took me on a shamanic journey to the underworld and taught me a lot of stuff along the way. Some of which I was told that I could speak of, and some of which I was told I could not. So I don't. And actually, probably most of the stuff that she said I couldn't speak of, I don't remember anyway. I remember it on a higher level, but not probably on a conscious level. But I do remember one thing. And this, you might find this interesting. She told me right before we started the journey that when we go down in the underworld, never smile and show your teeth, because that was considered like a dog, and a dog, it was considered to be a very aggressive. So you don't want to do that when you're in the underworld. You'll attract the wrong kind of attention. So I didn't do that. And I actually had an interesting journey, but like I said, it's not something for everyone. It's very, very intense. People think about, because it's a hallucinogen, people think about, the back in the 60s and acid and all that. Not even close, okay? Because there is a huge, what's called the purge. And believe you me, it's not a recreational drug. You are
Yeah.
you get very ill in the purge phase. And when I say
Mhm.
ill, I mean it's coming out both ends at the same time. And it's not, there's nothing recreational about this. It is really a healing journey.
And probably in that circumstance, it was you were very much taken care of, protected, like
Yes.
there were probably like medical or they were
Well,
personnel there that knew how to manage those symptoms.
exactly. This is again something, and that's something that worries me too. There's a lot of people out there, claiming to be shamans and doing, ayahuasca journeys here in North America, and I just go, no, I wouldn't go near anything like that because I was working with a shaman, a generational shaman who had been a shaman for a Peruvian shaman for 40 years, and his father was a shaman, and you know how it goes. And also with a couple who ran this retreat center, and like you said, we were in a shelter and that we were looked after, and yeah, it's not something to play around with because
Yeah.
the thing about ayahuasca, I didn't because I was there for 3 weeks, so I did many, many journeys. Each journey can be totally different, and there are some journeys that are very, peaceful and light and love and all that stuff. But there are also journeys that people go through that can be very, very dark, and
Mhm.
you can get lost, and there's a lot of things. I'm just saying that it helped me, and I know a lot of other people. It's healed from both psychological, emotional, and some people physical things too, which is really interesting. But I wouldn't recommend it for everyone.
And I mean, I think that this is really a good thing for our listeners. And I talk about this a lot. Like, you have to know the source of your information, and you
Exactly.
have to know like the source of where you're going. And, this is the thing that's a little bit scary. And maybe we could talk about like just general intuition. But what about those people who maybe they have either this lack of intuition or their feelings muddy their decisions? Like they seem to not be able to hear that still small voice. Like, what would you say in that regard? Or how would you encourage someone who's just
Well,
not great at,
the big thing is if you want to hear that little still voice, guess what? You got to get still. This is the biggest problem with people. And this is why I am such a huge promoter of meditation. I start sounding like a realtor. Meditation, meditation, meditation. Okay. Because if you want to connect to yourself, if you want to connect to your own intuition or that of your guides, your angels, whatever, or just to be still enough so you can actually feel your own discernment,
Mm,
okay? And discernment is helps us make those choices, helps us know what's true and not true. Because when you're following something, when you're making a decision to do something, it's quite common to have a little bit of nervousness or a little bit of anxiety, especially because a lot of times we're stepping out of our comfort zone. But
mm,
that's very different than fear. Okay. I would
yeah.
never do anything that I actually had fear about. That's a very different, because, people say, some people call themselves fearless. And I say, whoa, really, there's no such thing. You're stupid if you walk around saying you're fearless, because fear is there for a reason. Fear is
Yeah.
there to protect us. Okay.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and some people think brave or courageous people are fearless. No, that's not bravery. That's not courage. That bravery and courage are when you're fearful of something, but you're capable of doing it anyway. Like when you know that it's right and you need to do something and it's or you have to put yourself, you're helping somebody and you're afraid because you have to put yourself in jeopardy in order to help this person. That's
Mm-hmm.
real courage. Okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
bravery. Just being an idiot and saying I'm fearless and I'm going to, I see some people doing some very crazy, crazy things. And it's not that I'm like this weak little wallflower. I've done some very dangerous things in my life, rock climbing and mountaineering and all kinds of things where you can be very in great danger. But it's one
Yeah.
thing doing those things with proper preparation, with proper skills, and with proper equipment. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother thing about just going, oh, hey, I'm going to go do this. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, fear is there to protect us. Yeah. So I like this. Yeah, there's a difference between being fearful and having courage to step out into the unknown or to go beyond our limits or to stretch ourselves, to push ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, because really, if you're really feeling absolute that kind of fear, that paralyzing fear, I wouldn't be moving. I'd be moving in another direction. Okay, because that's just telling you that this is not the direction that you're going in. Or sometimes another method of discernment. Like I said to you, these things were brought to me and the synchronicities happened and the doors opened. Okay, the doors opened. I found out about this program and everything happened. It was like the dominoes were just falling by themselves. Okay, it was a very easy route. Another way to sort of be discerning is if you're trying to do something, you keep pushing to do something and the doors keep closing, or there's always, it's one complication after another. That just means that you're probably moving in the wrong direction. I will put a
Mm-hmm.
corollary on that. Okay. Sometimes that happens just because the timing isn't right. Okay. For that
Yeah.
particular thing. But it's the same thing. You're getting a definite no and trying to push through something when you're handed no's in succession is really a waste of time and not too smart either because you often end up paying a price because you're
Yeah.
simply not meant to do that thing or to do it at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
So I always suggest to my clients that either scrap it all together or let it lie put it on the back burner. I love that saying.
Mm-hmm.
Put it on the back burner and, maybe give it a couple months or something and then try it again and see if the doors start, if the dominoes start falling for you. If the dominoes start falling, then you know that it's actually meant for you. It's just the timing that was an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great advice. I'm pulling some amazing advice from you for our listeners. Like, yeah, meditation, we have to be quiet. We have to watch when we're very fearful. We have to watch when we keep banging our head against the same
Well,
doors. And you're very much a proponent of self-care, right?
huge.
Talk to me a little bit about what you do for self-care.
Well, since we just mentioned it, one of the biggest things I do for self-care is meditation. Okay. Now, a quick thing on that. There's so many different kinds of meditation that you can find something that works for you and with you. Okay. Just keep trying. I usually recommend for people who are beginning in meditation or who have difficulty with meditation to look at guided meditation. And then even within guided meditation, there's a pretty big swath of choices. Okay. The other
Yes.
thing is hugely to be out in nature
Mm.
as much as you possibly can. And the more wilderness it is, the better, okay? Because the more wilderness it is, the higher the frequency, okay?
Mhm.
Because the less interfered with, like parks and everything around the city or on the outskirts is wonderful to be, because those are the things that we have the most access to on a daily or weekly basis. But if you can really get out in the wilderness, that I've had some of my most amazing spiritual encounters, shall we say, or experiences in the wilderness. Okay. That's where I had my out of body experience.
Let's just jump in and talk about that. And then I'm going to ask a little bit about the wilderness and electricity and 5G, but let's talk about that out of body experience.
Well, it was when I was 15 and I was actually working for the YMCA and I was working at a provincial slash state for our American friends, very large park, provincial park way up in northern Ontario. And it was all rock and trees and lakes and rivers. And it was a canoe camp, but part of the program was also rock climbing and rappelling. And we happened to be rock climbing and rappelling, and we were well, the way it works is you rock climb up the face and then you rappel down it. Okay. So we were actually on the top of the cliff, sort of in a rest period, gearing up to rappel down the face. And I was just at the edge of the cliff, and I was just looking, and all you could see to the horizon was rock, trees, and water. And it was just absolutely beautiful. The awe of that beauty is, I think, what triggered my out of body experience. And all of a sudden, I just left my body, and I was in literally like in the sky, looking down at my own body and all my compadres on the sitting around and working on the cliff. And I was like, wow. And I wasn't afraid at all. I felt incredibly expanded, but yet I still felt like myself, which was interesting. And I was just getting used to that. And then all of a sudden it was like whoosh. And all of a sudden I was outside of the planet Earth, looking down onto planet Earth. Now I'm going to date myself. Because when I grew up, when I was very small, was when they were doing the moon landings and the orbiting the Earth and all that for the first time. So a lot of the astronauts were talking about how, because that was the first time we actually saw the Earth from outside the Earth. Okay, it was a very momentous occasion. And they talked about how thrilling and how awe-inspiring that was. And now I know, at 15, I found out how incredibly wonderful it was, because that's what I was doing. And again, I felt perfectly safe. I felt incredibly expanded, but I also felt like myself. And I was just getting used to that. And then all of a sudden, whoosh again. And I found myself out in the universe, because there was all spiral galaxies around me, and I could see all these. And I also had this expanded knowledge, because I looked over in this one spiral galaxy. I said, "Oh, that's the Milky Way." Because at this point we hadn't seen the Milky. Remember, we hadn't seen the Milky Way. Okay, we didn't see that until those big telescopes were invented. Okay, and I went, "Oh, that's the Milky Way." And there's that little arm, and there's Earth right on that little arm, because we're right on one of the little arms of the Milky Way. And I was just like, wow, like I was totally blown away by this. And I was starting to think about, wow, if now I'm out in the universe, what's next? And it was kind of like, just as I was thinking, what's next? All of a sudden, it was like Star Trek. This giant, this is what it felt like. It felt like this giant hand came and grabbed me and yanked me back into my body. And so I found myself in my body, which I tell you wasn't a pleasant experience, because I always say it was like taking a basketball and trying to stuff it back into a Coke bottle. Okay, which really doesn't work very well. Because my energy was so expanded, my soul, whatever you want to look at it as. So it actually took me several days to start to feel comfortable in my own body. But what I found out is this experience, to me, it felt like probably like about an hour and a half, something like that. But of course, I learned in the 3D that it was like seconds. It was probably like a minute and a half. Because what had actually happened, what had actually pulled me back into my body so quickly, was that one of the climbing instructors had actually gotten nervous that I was too close to the edge of the cliff. And he had grabbed the back of my pants and yanked me back. And that's what literally yanked me back into my body. Okay, the energy of what it was. So this totally changed my thoughts of death, of who we are, of what the soul was, of all kinds of things. Because obviously I was outside of my body and I wasn't dead. Okay, that's the first, right? I'm outside of my body. I'm having all these experiences. And not only that I was me. I can't tell you, how we see ourselves as ourselves, but I still felt totally like me. So it wasn't like I became somebody or something else when I left my body. So that just showed me that who we really were was this spirit, this essence, this energy, and our bodies were merely a container. Now, don't get me wrong. I've learned over the years that container is very important. Okay. But when we talk about the energy of who we really are, that is something separate from the body.
Interesting. Like that would be our soul, right?
Our soul, yeah.
Yeah. So, Laura, you've had like that experience, what would that be? 1 in a million? I mean, how many people have like an out of body experience when they're not sort of in an illness / almost death state? right?
Well, that's what everybody's asked me to kind of put a label on it, and it's very hard because I learned and have done a lot of reading and have actually talked to a lot of people who've had NDEs, which are near death experiences where they actually died and like had their heart stopped or they stopped breathing or whatever and they were brought back. Well, I that wasn't the case for me. But I've also experienced astral traveling and out of that kind of out of body experiences. And I've had some in the dream state too. So I just consider it to be kind of a combination between because it has some elements, not all, but some elements of an NDE, but it also has the elements of astral traveling. So I think it was kind of a combination of between the two. So that's how I look at it.
Hmm.
Yeah. I tell you though, I've been trying to in different various ways. I've come close to reenacting that experience. Probably the closest that I've come would be some of the ayahuasca experiences that I had.
Mhm.
Trying to think of unaided. I've had some interesting. I was dabbling for a while in remote viewing, which is a whole nother topic. I look at remote viewing as just another name for astral traveling because that's what they're doing. They're taking their energy and they're plopping it in a different space and looking around. That's what remote viewing is. They're projecting their
Interesting.
energy into another place and time and looking around and describing what they see. That's what I keep
Interesting. I've
losing.
literally never
Yeah.
heard of that. So
You've never
I'm
heard of
getting
remote
exposed.
viewing? That
No,
that yeah, it's actually been around a long time.
really.
It was actually promoted and sort of created in a sense by the military in secret
Really?
for a long time
Wow.
for obvious reasons. You can spy on people without having to physically send people to a particular space. Okay. So
Wow.
it was developed, the whole kind of looking for the right word, the logistics of it, the technique, there's a good word. The technique of it was developed by the military, the
Wow.
shadow side of the military. But then it came out into the public, and actually a couple of people that brought it to the public, or which is really interesting. I think probably the first people were actually people that were part of different projects. They have a military background. Let's just say that. It's probably the easiest way of saying it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's
This is
another
so
thing.
intriguing.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there's it's all the same thing in the sense that it's about having your energy outside of your body. All three of those things, whether you're talking about remote viewing or astral traveling or even NDEs, it's the same thing because during an NDE, people's soul energy leaves their body for a while. So it's really all the same thing. The nuances and the way that you get there is somewhat different, but the basic energy transfer is the same.
Intriguing. This is really intriguing, Laura. I think so many of our listeners are maybe processing this. So you actually do some one-on-one work. You do some work with grief, with your psychic abilities. Where can we find you? How can my listeners find you?
Well, I really do three things. I do my spiritual counseling, which is one-on-one, which helps people. I always say I help people make their lives work. It can be about your personal issues, family issues. I counsel people on business and on spiritual growth. Okay, that's the counseling end of it. I also do what I call intuitive coaching, and I have a program called Create the Life You Really Want. Imagine that. Okay. It's really about creating and that's for a lot of people who are in transition, whether it be divorce, whether it be the second half of life, just people who are literally wanting to recreate themselves in whatever way. Okay. And that's a 3-month program. The other thing I do is the mediumship, and that's the only thing. My counseling and coaching are done online through Zoom, like we're doing here. It's very, very effective that way. So I have clients all over the world. The mediumship is the only thing that I do in group form. And I do that in person because I've been told that that's the best way to do it. Sometimes I do some mediumship in one-on-one sessions, but that's different.
Okay.
It's a little bit different. There's usually an individual reason why somebody's coming to contact, but I find doing the mediumship group is the best way to do that, and the best way is in person. So that's
okay.
So I only do that locally. And the best way to contact me is easy. It's through my website, which is spiritspeaks2.me. Or you can email me directly at laurahorweg@gmail.com.
Wow, wonderful. Laura, this has been such an intriguing, exciting, eye-opening conversation. Anything else that you want to leave our guests with today?
If you really want your life to work, you need to move as close as you can possibly get to your authentic self. And that is moving towards your authentic self is part of the reason behind self-care. Because if you want to know yourself, you have to get intimate with yourself. Because we all come in at that authentic self, and then parents, school, advertising, culture, religion, everybody's so busy telling us who we should be as opposed to helping us find out who we really are. Good note to end on.
I love this. Laura. Yeah. Find out more about who you are authentically. Who you are. And that'll help your life work for you.
If you want to really know yourself, you have to connect with your authentic self. Because otherwise you're just a part of the brainwashed masses. And if you want to connect to spirit and your guidance, everybody always asks me, how do you connect? You can't really connect with your own personal guidance and your spirit guides unless you're connected to your authentic self. Because the way that we connect above, we don't reach up, we reach in and then up. And that's the biggest mistake most people make. They think they can just reach out to spirit. You have to go in and then up.
That's a really cool differentiation. I love that. So many neat things for our listeners to think about. Well, Laura, anybody who wants to find you, they can go to www.spiritspeaks2me with the number 2 or email you directly, laurahorweg@gmail.com.
And I'm all over Facebook.
Thank you so much. And all over Facebook.
But I know that you are going to put all my links in the show notes.
Yes, I sure am. And I'm going to tag you on socials so people can find us everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, like, or subscribe? You can find me on social media at wautierwellness.com, Dr. Stephanie Wautier on Instagram, or Wautier Wellness Chiropractic and Massage on Facebook. And I'm so curious where your next conversation will take you. This episode of Conversations with a Chiropractor is supported by Lemon Grove Oil. One of the things I'm always paying attention to, both in this podcast and in my work, is where something comes from. Not just what a product says it does, but who created it, why they created it, and whether there is real care behind it. That is one of the reasons Lemon Grove Oil feels like such a natural fit here. Lemon Grove was founded by chiropractor Dr. Jerry Del Canton. This is not a random wellness brand that appeared overnight because CBD became popular. It grew out of the chiropractic world, where trust matters, where quality matters, and where people are often looking for thoughtful ways to support themselves between visits, during their busy seasons of life, and in the day-to-day routines that shape how they feel. Lemon Grove offers professional-grade CBD products, including topical lotions, butters, roll-ons, and gummies. They focus on quality, transparency, THC-free formulations with third-party testing, and products designed with healthcare providers in mind. I think that matters because when you are choosing something for yourself or your family, you want more than nice packaging. You want to know there is a real philosophy behind it. If you're curious about lemon grove oil, visit their website at www.lemongroveoil.com.
Visit the link in the description and use code DRStephanie at checkout to save 10% on your next order. This offer is exclusive to listeners of Conversations with a Chiropractor.